Hello, and welcome back to the channel. As mentioned in the last report, I have no more reps to upload before 10th, so in the meantime I thought I'd do a little retrospective video covering 8th and 9th edition. I'll be breaking down each of my army's win rates.
There are volumes of proven data, numbers, figures.
As well as my general thoughts on the army and my time playing it. At the end, I've poured over the last 85 reports and selected some of my favorite photos.
You lucky people!
So before we get into it, a couple of things to note. I started keeping a note of my games when I started this channel, and the first report was played in November 2019. I played a handful of games before then, but I'm starting from the first report. Secondly, I'm only counting games of 1,500 points or more. That's the vast majority of games I've played, and the reason I've not counted games lower than that is I didn't feel the GW's rules scaled well enough at lower points to make the result of such games particularly meaningful.
Oh, this is classic liberal bullshit!
And lastly, I have 85 reports on the channel, most of which qualify, but I've actually played 117 qualifying games all told across 8th and 9th, and I'm going off those figures.
Oh, this is classic liberal bullshit!
Right, let's get into it then, starting with the lowest ranking army first. It's the newcomers, Tau. Oof, 4 games played, and only 1 win. I feel I was quite close to 50-50 here, as my last game was played quite some time after the others, and I just shit the bed. Tau have been quite a ride, actually. I amassed a huge collection a few months before their 9th codex dropped, when I figured out a paint scheme that worked for me. However, after their codex came out in early 2022, I shelved them for almost a year due to the overwhelmingly negative player base reaction, which deemed them ridiculously overpowered and broken.
What could they possibly have done to deserve such barbaric and inhuman treatment?
I basically put them away and decided not to try them out until I really felt the urge again, which came in late 2022. I definitely regret doing this, as I think they were toned down a fair bit reasonably quickly, and I'd have liked to have gotten a few more games in with their 9th codex. Regardless, I'm pretty happy having this army as a backup for when I feel like bringing the big guns out. I'm pleased with my paint scheme, and keen to keep tinkering with them and growing the army over time. In 6th place, we're still the wrong side of 50, but take a big leap up to 42%, with the frickin' golden banana boys themselves.
Shiny, golden, big-ass sword.
I've been playing these since before the start of the channel, and they got off to a rough start on here, losing 7 of their first 9 games, although 3 of those were non-qualifying. I've enjoyed them by and large, although I once again shied away from them for about 10 months after trying their 9th codex out for a bit, when they developed a reputation for being an ultra-cheeseball army. I consider these guys one of my staple armies, and can't see myself ever parting with them. I do feel their army design constantly leaves them on a knife edge, though. Because they're still only humans, albeit pimped to the max, they rely on force multiplying rules and tactics to allow them to go toe-to-toe with the big gribblies of the galaxy. This can sometimes make them feel too oppressive, so they end up getting their cool toys taken away from them, and then they suddenly start looking horribly fragile and expensive. Oh well, it is what it is, and golden banana custard cream lads rule. Up next, it's the Green Gits, who just pipped the Golden Boys, with a 43% win rate, although far less games played. These have been a fun army to use, providing a very different playstyle from the rest. It all started during lockdown when I nabbed a huge army secondhand.
Yeah, well, I got them cheap, didn't I?
And I've added quite a lot since then. In terms of model count, and probably points too, it's definitely my biggest army. However, it's also the army which is in the most disarray. Tons of the models have become broken and need patching up, and I have a dizzying amount of models still unpainted or half-painted, or needing to have their bases redone. The army takes up a ton of space, and is something of a nightmare to organize. If I only played orcs and a couple of other armies it wouldn't be much of an issue, but as it stands it's starting to feel like a bit much. We move on to Thousand Sons in 4th place, who finally crossed the 50% Rubicon, sitting at a 52% win rate. I mean, I'm not exactly that bothered about win rates and everything, but since I do keep a note of my games it's nice to know that at least some of my armies have managed to rack up a positive win rate over the last 2 editions.
You don't actually care. You don't actually care.
Another army I've owned since before the start of the channel, and one which has swollen and grown like a mutated tendril from the distended more of the changer of ways itself.
That's beautiful, that's wonderful, that's lovely, isn't it? That's lovely.
No matter the ups and downs this army has had in the past, I've felt that they always retain a vicious edge, due to the nature of mortal wounds and the sheer volume they can put out when they want to. Without much in the way of long-range threats, they reward a very conservative playstyle mixed with one or two decisive surges for a knockout blow, which I feel like is probably my preferred playstyle overall. Let's not forget that I also leaned heavily on the mighty Vindicator Laser Destroyer for most of the more recent games I played with them, which racked up a truly absurd number of impressive kills. However, with psychic abilities in 10th looking massively less threatening and very rarely being able to fulfill the role of anti-tank, I'm unsure of how exactly these guys are gonna work in 10th.
What am I gonna do?
Being able to suddenly crowd round a seemingly immovable object, and simply blast it off the board with mortal wounds, was the main way we dealt with tough things, and with that avenue effectively closed off, I'm very interested to see what other tricks we'll have up our sleeve. Next, Craft Worlds. I only started playing these as a standalone faction in 9th, and I've enjoyed them a lot, particularly the ton of flavor, power, and customizability they gave to Aspect Warriors. It looks like these are being toned down in 10th as part of the general lethality reduction. I have a simple grayscale theme for my space elves, which means I'm not daunted by the thought of painting any of the range, and I intend to add more to the army in future. I already have a bunch of stuff in the paint queue, such as Warwalkers, a Wave Serpent, and a metric shit ton of support weapons which I bought over lockdown and need to repaint to match my new color scheme. Definitely one of my favorite armies to paint and use. In second place, with 57%. It's everyone's favorite chicken-legged stompy robots.
These chickens are scared. They don't know why they're so big.
A bit of an anomaly here. These were another lockdown whim army, born out of boredom and a sudden desire to paint up some big models. I painted them in an extremely rusty, muddy, grimy color scheme and I've gone off it a bit lately. These are also the only army whose 9th edition codex I didn't even buy, as by the time it came out I just couldn't see myself foregoing a game with one of my other armies. And I couldn't be bothered to try to get to grips with yet another bunch of rules. This army could go one of three ways. Either it languishes in the cupboard for a while longer and I eventually sell it, or I get hyped about it again in 10th edition, or I sell it and then one day have another go at painting up a new army from scratch, in a neater paint scheme.
Huh?
Yeah, I could legitimately see myself doing that third one, as ridiculous as it sounds. I think one of the things putting me off using them is I keep wishing I'd done a different scheme. And the current scheme is so grimy and messed up that I couldn't repaint them. It would have to be new models. Oh, I don't know. I'll think about it. And taking first place, it's the frickin' Space Murder Clowns, with 57% also.
Hello.
So that actually puts them in joint first place with Chaos Knights, but I feel like Harleys kind of deserve the top spot to themselves, as they've played triple the amount of games. Another strange journey with this army. I bought them around the start of the channel, and the first report was actually my first time using them. Once I got used to them they had a ton of success throughout 8th edition, but a harder time in 9th as I struggled to make them work. Then, the Eldar Codex came out, they got rolled back into it instead of having their own standalone codex, and somehow apparently became the most oppressively broken army the game has ever seen, at least until Votann dropped. I basically barely used them since then, and have kind of lost touch with them, unfortunately. Whilst I have no plans to part with them currently, they're not 100% safe like some of my other armies. So, taking everything into account, we end up with a 49% win rate. 49. Just one fricking pip away. 1.
You don't actually care. You don't actually care.
Ah well, it would have been nice to get the extra pip. But like I said, it doesn't matter, I was just interested to see the result. And I at least have more wins than losses. Anyway, 9th edition draws to a close, and we're 9 minutes in, so I've gone ahead and selected 9 of my favorite photos.
It's mysterious, in a way.
I'm just doing these in order of oldest to newest. First up, we have this shot of my golden banana boys facing down a knight from Report 6. The knight has LED lights in its eyes. For some reason I put this weird border around the photos for the first few reports. But apart from that I think it's a pretty epic pic. The next pic I chose is actually from the very next report, and features a different knight from the same army, about to be vaporized by Magnus. I love how they're kind of mirroring each other's pose. As I recall, the knight brought Magnus down to 1 wound remaining, but then got melted in the following psychic phase. We're now jumping all the way ahead to report 42, which was a mixed Thousand Sons and Demons list versus Death Guard. This was right at the tail end of 8th edition, and as well as looking freaking epic, this picture really shows the massive difference that 9th made when it improved the obscuring terrain rules. Here, As with many 8th games, we're just lined up across from one another and braced for impact. Terrain plays very little role and most things can shoot at most other things. This was a crazy game, and I just love the image of my horde of skittering demons hurtling towards the disciplined ranks of the Death Guard. Next, Report 61, Orcs vs Black Templars. A lot of awesome things in this game, but I really love that there was a little side battle raging for ages between a chaplain and these Gretchen. It wasn't intentional, but the lazy placement of the Gretchen with some of them facing away from him actually looks way better, as if they're running away, and the chaplain looks so goddamn awesome here wading through them. I think he ended up getting run over by a scrapjet though. Report 68, Craft Worlds vs World Eaters. It was the debut of Craft Worlds on the channel, in fact, and I was mighty pleased that our two biggest models got to fight in single combat. You'll have to watch the report if you want to find out which of these mighty warriors prevailed. Speaking of mighty warriors, my Abaddon led the Thousand Sons into battle against Gazkul in Report 71, and we did manage to maneuver them into this epic duel. Both with wound caps and both absolutely mental in combat, this was a clash which shook the ground. Not sure how I feel about the removal of wound caps in 10th edition. They were certainly annoying sometimes, but I don't think leading a squad will necessarily be able to provide quite the same level of reliable protection. I guess time will tell. Report 77. My orcs fought a different Black Templars army, and this time they had armor of contempt. Much frustration ensued as my army pretty much just bounced off them. However, there was one epic moment in the middle of the battle when my beast boss attempted to single-handedly turn the tide, and crashed into a unit of Terminators in the center, killing all but one, leading to this awesome pick of the last Terminator valiantly struggling against the mountain of teeth and muscle. And the Squigosaur. This next pick is from Report 82, and it's the only pick to feature none of my own models. I just had to include it, to show the three greater demons absolutely dwarfed by the towering monstrosity of this incredible brass scorpion. This was a 3,000 point per side doubles match, and had the absolute most amount of huge models I've ever had on one table. Finally, Report 83, my Tau vs Chaos Knights, and I just couldn't resist including a picture of these two knights fighting back to back in the center of the board. Such an awesome visual, and I can really imagine them slowly circling round, laying waste to everything they see. There were a ton of other pictures I could have chosen, but a lot of them suffered from bad angles, tokens or terrain cluttering the picture, or just being taken from too far away. Anyway, that about does it. I've enjoyed taking a look at each army and reminiscing about battles gone by. It'll be a few weeks now until I'm able to play 10th and potentially get a report up. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.